finally made it to New Orleans. I'm Gregg Rosenthal here on the beautiful iHeart Studio set at the Convention Center in downtown New Orleans. Obviously, with NFL media, the collaboration of a lifetime, and I've got the collab I've always wanted surrounding me right now. On one side, it's Jourdan Rodrigue of The Athletic. On the other, it's Nick Shook coming in at
35.
NFL.
Thank you for not doing my weight. Appreciate that.
And media. What's up? We're here.
We're here.
Yes.
I'm glad you guys landed. I've been here since Sunday. I'm glad you made it safely. I hope you're adjusting to Central Time.
Yeah, you know what? I'm a little nervous about our seating placement right now, Nick. For the listeners, we are in the middle of the Gregg Rosenthal hand flying about zone.
Oh, you're real close.
Already almost got smacked twice, 3 times, and I might have to smack you back, Greg.
Don't tempt me with a good time. We are really excited about this show. It's a preview show, but it's not just any preview show, and it's really cool, by the way. Just
Yeah.
I love having you next to me, Jourdan. We've done that all week. Heck, we flew down here. We got in to New Orleans around midnight. Got to the hotel. It was a whole thing. We got celebs on the plane. We got Roma Dunze picking up bags, but we never have our buddy Shook. And it's just like. It's a long time. It's good.
I know. It's fantastic. The last time we did a show in studio was great. Now I'm happy to be here with you. I've been looking forward to this for weeks.
Me too.
So, like I said, it's not a normal preview show. We are going to have a couple guests to help us along the way. But for the preview of the Super Bowl, we are going only to prime ball knowers.
Ooh.
So we are going to throw it to an interview right now with Fred Warner, one of the smartest players in the entire NFL, 4-time All-Pro, who has played these two teams, the Eagles and the Chiefs, at the highest of levels, the NFC Championship, the Super Bowl, of course, last year against the Chiefs. After that, we'll come back, and we're going to give our preview, and then we'll finish out the show with my favorite color analyst in the entire game, Greg Olsen.
Hell yeah.
So we're going to be the meat.
I threw my pen.
Some great analyst sandwich. But we are starting the show. You know, Nick, you're not part of this interview, so we'll say goodbye to you for just a second.
Goodbye.
And we'll say hello to Fred Warner, and we'll be back in just a little bit. All right, we are here with one of our favorite, I'm just going to say it, players in the entire NFL.
We went there, Fred.
4-time All-Pro linebacker Fred Warner, who's here on behalf of Experian, which can help you improve your financial health and keep money in your pockets. And yeah, I think it's because you can see the ball knowing, right, Jourdan, when you're watching.
Fred, we have to tell you, NFL Daily, we go into the weeds on X's and O's all the time, and we cannot wait to talk to you because you are to us the elite ball knower in the NFL.
Wow. Hey,
so we're gonna do something
praise.
a little bit different with you today, and
Wonderful.
I know you're ready because you're ready for anything because you're Fred freaking Warner. Yes. So we want to break down this game with you. We're trusting you with our preview show.
You're
okay.
Kicking off
Surprise.
the preview.
I know. Yeah, I know a couple things about some football.
So we've seen. So we've seen. So we're just excited to dig into this matchup. You know, it seems like fated at this point, and in my opinion, these are two of the best teams in the NFL right now this year. Clashing against each other. And I guess when you look at one key matchup that you cannot wait to just diagnose, break down, probably jump out of your seat because I know you want to be out there doing it yourself. What is something that jumps off the page to you about these teams?
Yeah, I think the matchup I'm looking at, obviously Saquon Barkley against the Kansas City defense. I can't even just say one player because it's going to take the entire defense. The Kansas City's defense, I think, has been the thing that people haven't talked about enough. Of course, it's easy to talk about Andy Reid. It's easy to talk about Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, because they're all Hall of Fame, people, right? Like they all have done an amazing job winning championships for their team. But the defense, I think, has done a tremendous job. It's under Spagnuolo in what he's been able to do with these guys. There's guys who've been interchangeable throughout their system for years now. I think they saw the piece that's been remaining the same is Chris Jones, perennial All-Pro, who's amazing. But I'm interested to see how do they stop Saquon, because everybody's been wanting to do that all season long. Everybody says it every week. Nobody's done it, so I want to see what that looks like.
And you, in your role, you have to think about that all the time, and especially because if he does get past Chris Jones, hard to do, but if he does, Saquon Barkley is one of the hardest players to stop in the second and third level of the defense in the entire NFL, and certainly has looked every bit of that this year. So as a middle linebacker, how do you stop him once he gets to the second level? What's your communication to the rest of sort of the players orbiting around you in getting to him and bringing him down?
Well, the beautiful thing about it is you're not out there alone. All right. People try to make it about one-on-one matchups in football, which, a lot of the time it is about winning your one-on-one. But in this game, it's going to be about all 11 swarming to the football, like more than ever. You cannot allow him to have that space. If he does have space, then he's able to create, so you got to make sure that you're eliminating that space by getting all guys. I need that outside corner out there who's covering A.J. Brown. As soon as you see it's a run, you need to be sprinting, because we need everybody at the ball.
You've obviously been in this position. Let's say you're lining up against the Eagles. We talked a little bit about Saquon, but before the snap, they present a lot to you, obviously. They can do the RPOs. They can play faster if they want. Jalen Hurts is obviously a good kind of vertical runner. What are some of your keys as they're setting up to snap the ball when you're playing against the Eagles that are in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I played the Eagles a couple times, especially a couple years back. We played them in the NFC Championship, and then the year after playing them in the regular season. And the thing for me as a middle linebacker, like, my coach always tells me, just take a step back. Like, everybody wants to crowd the line of scrimmage because you're so eager to stop the run. But if you're getting too tight to the line of scrimmage, you're not able to see the full picture. You get down there and you start trying to just stop the run. Guess what? A.J. Brown's running a slant right behind your head, and they're doing the RPO. They're dunking it to him, and he's running for a 70-yard touchdown on a slant. It's like, I thought we were just being told to stop Saquon. It's like, no, they have weapons all over Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert. So at the end of the day, you got to take a step back, give yourself more time to read the play. Who has the ball? Is it Jalen or is it Saquon? That's another level of it where you got to read the zone read. If you're a defensive end and you get zone read, are you being told to take the dive with Saquon, or are you being told to take the quarterback with Jalen? All these little things are so monotonous, but every detail matters.
You kind of always rooting for Jalen to just keep the ball.
Yeah. If I'm a coordinator, I'm like, hey, tackle the dive, tackle Saquon, make Jalen take the ball every single time.
And I love how you describe that. Like, of course I did, because you're Fred Warner. But the way that you have to give a play patience on your side, you hear it all the time when people talk about running backs. Be patient, let the play unfold. On your side of things, you have to do the same thing and trust what you see and trust what you know. And so I wonder, when you're flipping it around and you're looking at the Chiefs and they're giving you misdirection and motion and all kinds of wrinkles and little cheap motions to the outside that I know you guys see a lot in practice.
Yeah.
And little orbits and things where you're keeping track of all of these different orchestrations pre-snap. How do you give those plays patience? How do you trust what you see there? What do you look at first?
It's so tough. I mean, I hate to say it, I have yet to defeat them, and solve that puzzle, right? I mean, I tried my best, and we've had some game plans where they've been more effective than others. The thing about Kansas City offense is they're unorthodox. You prepare every week where it's like, all right, this team runs this system. They have these players. They're going to do exactly that, and that's exactly what we need to stop. And then you go against Kansas City. It's like, wait, they run what? They do what? He runs it like how? And it's like, and then you get in the game and it's like, you might've been preparing for something all week. And it's like, it's so much different when you're in the moment. You're trying to play against these players like a Travis Kelce, like a Patrick Mahomes, with the savvy and the connection that they have, right? So there's so many levels to it. And at the end of the day, everybody just got to do their 111 and, and hope for the best.
We like to talk a lot on this show about how Andy Reid and the Chiefs, particularly with his screen game, which it's a legendary playbook. It's like 600 pages long, just screens, right?
Yes.
I know Kyle's is similar
in
terms of the amount of plays, but Andy Reid, I mean, my goodness. And so the ways he sets things up, the ways he layers things in the first quarter and then builds off of it in a totally different way based on your first reaction in the third quarter. What have you seen from that offense? And I guess, what is it, even as elite as you are, all of these years at an all-pro level, what does it still teach you after all this time?
It humbles you every time, because it truly is a game of chess, and that's exactly what Andy's doing. That's what all the great play callers and offensive coordinators do in this league. They are setting you up for the long game. because people talk about coming out in the game and starting fast, which of course you'd love to start fast. Everybody wants to start fast because that helps you out a ton in the game. But now the thing that I'm learning more and more throughout my career is it matters more how you finish. You got to finish even faster than how you start. And if you're implementing certain things within the beginning of the game to then set yourself up for success later in the game, where it's like, oh yeah, I remember he did kind of come down on the run early in the game, so now we can hit him on the RPO or the play action later on in the game. Like those little things do matter in the heat of battle.
Yeah, because look, last year's game couldn't have been more evenly played. Obviously, it was overtime. It's a team game. A lot went into what happened. But I watched that game and I talked about it afterwards, and I remember saying what I thought was the 49ers defense, they did come out fast. They did enough to me to win. They held Mahomes down for a long time. So what was it in that game where you're holding him to single digits after a lot of possessions in that game that you thought you guys were doing well in that game that slowed them down?
Well, I mean, if you look back a year ago, before that game, in the entire playoffs, or not entire, we had the 1 seed, so we had a bye. But playing against Green Bay, playing against Detroit, we could not stop the run to save our lives on defense. Like we were getting just tossed to the wolves before that Kansas City game, saying like, "Oh my gosh, this Niner defense is nothing like it's been in the past. We don't see these guys being able to stop anything Kansas City's got to do." So of course we carried all that with us and had a huge chip on our shoulder going into that game. So you saw the emotion right away, like of we're coming with some heat. You know what I'm saying? Like we know for a fact that we're the best defense in the league, and we're gonna show it today on the day that we need to show it the most. And but again, talking about a start versus a finish, we started fast, but what was more important, the finish. And we lost Dre Greenlaw in that game, which was a huge loss for us. That was a huge emotional dump for myself. You know, like I'm shedding tears on the sideline and at halftime. And when you need all the juice that you can get towards the end of that game in overtime, like you need all of that, right? And so those little things are so crucial in a game like that.
And we can talk scheme all day long, but it's the emotion of it, right? And a lot of these teams, I mean, the Chiefs, I always compare them to long haul truckers. They just know how to get there, and they know how to get to that extra gear in the dark down that highway and just go, right?
Yeah.
But this Eagles team, they've rebuilt very quickly. And there's a lot of youth. There's a lot of guys who've been there, getting there for the first time. A lot of emotion probably happening. A team that's kind of had an emotional season overall. There's been every week. It's something, man. On that,
right. No
right?
kidding.
Like, I hope you don't have a copy of that book at this point. But how would you, as a captain, as a leader, like how would you talk to these young players? What would you tell them to be ready for in a game like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's so cliche to say it's just another game, but you truly have to just treat it like it is another game. Because if you go into it thinking, okay, it's a Super Bowl, this is my moment, I'm going to go out here, I'm going to just throw everything that my coach has been telling me out the door and just go rogue, I promise you it is not going to go well. It's going to be a long day for you, and you're probably not going to end up with the trophy. So I know for me, my first Super Bowl in my second season, I had guys like a Richard Sherman who had been there and done that, be able to tell me like, hey, young buck, like this is just another game. Like just do what you've been doing all season. Like you've been playing at a high level. Just do that again this game, and we'll get to where we need to go. Now, we didn't get to where we needed to go, but, you know, so many things have to happen in your favor in order to win these games. And, you know, there is something to be said about having been there and winning the game and knowing what that recipe looks like for Kansas City. But on the opposite side, Philly is loaded. Like, you cannot find a weakness in their roster, whether it be O-line, D-line, skill players, like everybody's so great. So it's going to be an even matchup. I can't wait to watch.
As a 49er, I mean, who's played these teams in big spots, like do you have any kind of in your real gut, like the real Fred Warner that you kind of want to win?
No, I don't want both teams to lose. Yeah. I know that's unfortunately not possible. I wish it was, but I dislike both teams a lot. So there's no result there's no result where I'm happy about.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
people were sick of y'all too. This is in the last 6 years, 4 of the Super Bowls have been 49ers Chiefs or Eagles Chiefs, and obviously you guys made it back to the NFC Championship game so many times. We're looking forward to watching you next year. But before you go, tell us a little bit about Experian that you're working with here.
Yeah, no, Experian is amazing. They're all about saving time and money, which is what we're all trying to do, right? You talk about subscriptions, for example. let's say you've got a brand new Peloton and you get on that Peloton.
He
and
doesn't.
You know what I'm saying? Hey, listen, New Year's resolution, right? It's a new year. You get on the Peloton and you have to get the membership, right? It's not just buying the bike. You got to get the membership. But then a couple of weeks later, you're like, you know, it just wasn't for me. And so you put the bike away, but then you forget about the membership, right? We all fall victim to getting these little subscriptions. There might be like the little $3.99ers, right? That just kind of go under the radar and they stack up over time. Experian does a great job of you download the app, they take care of those subscriptions that you don't need or don't want, and just eliminate them. So then you're saving your time, saving your money, and live a great life.
See, he's taking a step back. He sees the whole field.
That's
in
right.
Life and on the field. Fred Warner, 4-time All-Pro. Appreciate you joining our preview show. We'll
appreciate you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That was Fred Warner, of course. Handsome man, very gregarious.
He was such a great break. He was breaking down so many things. I loved hearing about the details, the patience that he also has to show. And even defending a player like Saquon Barkley, you just have to, ram face through wall, right? If you're looking from the outside. But him explaining the intricacies and the nuances, that's what we're all about here on NFL Daily.
Yeah, it is really cool to sit next to someone and kind of get the vibe of like, okay, that even in that short of a period, you can kind of see how he's the type of guy, if he shows up to a combine interview, like all the coaches are going to be like, oh, I want him on my team. Like that's a leader. That's a real dude. But we're the leaders too. I don't want to sell us short. We're going to give our bulk of the preview right now. Because look, I know it's Super Bowl week. We've been talking a lot about the Rams and different news stories of what's happening, and we're going to have a lot of great interviews the rest of the week. At this point, I think we can just start teasing them. I was a little worried, but it's kind of crazy.
I know, you don't want to jinx them. I get it. Like,
if they don't show up, that's on them. We have Jaden Daniels coming up this week. We have Jordan Love coming up this week. We got Puka Nacua, Kobe Turner, Ashton Gianti, Jonathan Taylor,
Jahmyr Gibbs,
and David Montgomery. They're all coming up later this week, and we knew that, and there'll probably be some Super Bowl talk there with them, but a lot of that will be about their old team. So this is really where we're going to get into our preview of the game, and we have 6 categories, and we all like to honk. Can we possibly get through 6 categories in the time we have allotted? That is the challenge here, and I'm going to start with you, Shook. And just ask a really basic question. Just like, what are you most excited about?
Little table setter. I am just most excited for what probably everybody is who was here 2 years ago. The rematch. It is Eagles, Chiefs. It was one of the most thrilling Super Bowls that we ever saw. In fact, in the third quarter of that game, I was sitting there and I had a moment where I just thought, I'm at the best Super Bowl in history. It didn't end that way, but it was pretty close. Now we get these two teams again 2 years later. Yes, the roster is a little bit different. We have a combined total of 27 starters between these two teams returning. A lot of familiar faces. Some bad blood from that last matchup. I like it.
And it's greatness. It's truly great players. And that game builds the story. And I like the point that you made, because I think sometimes games that don't have the hot ending make you forget. Like, the first 57 minutes of the game were absolutely electric. It's why I always stand for Saints-Colts. As maybe my favorite and maybe the best Super Bowl of all time, even though the big moment happened with 4 minutes left in the game. But because those two teams were so excellent, because of the first 55 minutes and everything that went into it, and that's what happened in that first Eagles-Chiefs game, I'm totally with you. What are you most excited about?
Kind of along your point, Greg, is like, these are the 2 best teams in the NFL this year. And it almost never works out this way, where we're seeing them in the actual Super Bowl. And again, with so much tension and heat behind this history that these two now have. These are just the teams of who has the most dudes Super Bowl. This is the dude bowl, really.
Lots of dudes.
This is the dude bowl. Like, and I think the Eagles have the edge here, frankly. We'll get into it. But it's like at every position, a dude, right? I mean, someone who you would love, if you're a fan of any team, at almost every position, you would love to have that player on your team. And I love that we're going to see these teams collide in this way. And I love that they have these unique storylines that are very unique to them. The Chiefs being this dynastic super force that now people are starting to turn on a little bit as that super villain. And then the Eagles, who I personally love because they are so GD messy. I love how messy they've been. They've just lived with their hearts on their sleeves all season, and they've solved their own problems that they have also created. And I love watching these two teams kind of reach their peak powers at the right time and collide on Sunday.
I have to ask, are you into trash TV? Do you watch reality TV?
I'm not, but that's why I think I get a fix out of this, because I don't watch reality TV other than Quarterback Island. Plug. But, which you need to be on, by the way.
No.
You would be great on Quarterback
Let's do
Island.
it.
But I love it because they do not care. They're showing you exactly, the Eagles will show you exactly what their problems are, a lot of them of their own creation.
Nick can be our bouncer, by the way, on Quarterback Island.
True.
I will throw them out, metaphorically speaking.
Metaphorically speaking.
How messy will it be if Nick Sirianni actually wins the Super Bowl? You thought he was bad before? That guy's not going to shut up. You know how the Rams partied so much after that Super Bowl? What is a Nick Sirianni party? And then on the flip side,
I need to see that dude on top of a bus.
I don't want to think about it, but Nick Sirianni losing not a second Super Bowl in a row, but in 3 years here.
It's like
man,
the Jane Lynch meme. I'm going to create a situation so toxic. That's really what it is. It's like, it's seriously like, I can't wait. And Andy Reid, on the other hand, so calm, so stoic. But it works for both of these behemoths that we're about to see.
It's kind of funny, though, to think of the Chiefs as like, oh, they're the less talented team. Like, they have a first ballot Hall of Fame tight end. Maybe the greatest tight end ever. I'd still take Gronk, but there's plenty of arguments to be made there. They have the greatest quarterback of all time. They've got a first-team All-Pro cornerback. They've got one of the greatest defensive tackles of all time.
Yep.
If like George Karlaftis gets to free agency, he'd probably make about $25 to $30 million a year. Like,
and yet the Eagles are deeper.
Sure, they are. They are more
Which
talented.
is wild.
But it's
Which
not.
is wild.
The Chiefs are an extremely talented team. Thing I'm most excited about, just basic. As a true ball knower, I got really down and dirty. It's just the matchup in the trenches. I think it's because in the playoffs, I have more time to watch the All-22 when during the season I'm trying to watch every game that I can and like power through those condensed most of the time. And seeing these two 4-man pass rushers in pass rushes and thinking about that matchup and how much Nolan Smith has improved and Milton Williams and Jalen Carter next to him, how much they've improved as well. Josh Sweat, who's just as consistent as it gets, and Jalix Hunt even is adding a little pop, and Brandon Graham, who finished it out the last time, is probably in that game. And so that could be a great matchup against the Chiefs offensive line, which played really well in the AFC Championship. And then on the flip side, I do think people are sleeping a little bit on the 4-man rush that the Chiefs have now. And this is a theme I have throughout this preview. They are not the same team as they were the first 11, 12 weeks of the season. First of all, Karlaftis says that there is such a thing as playoff Karlaftis. It's
a mouthful.
Mike Dana wasn't always the most consistent. He maybe isn't there, but has played really well in the playoffs. Like, that is a good 4-man pass rush. Omenihu wasn't there all season and adds a lot to that group. And then Chris Jones is beating really good tackles on the edge and thinking about that matchup against the best offensive line in the league. So just kind of the matchup in the trenches.
I love it. I do believe you had a comp yesterday in the wee hours of whatever time it was when we finally got to New Orleans. You're the Jalen Carter of NFL Daily. I got to be the Milton Williams. I thought that was nice. That was nice. I thought that was nice.
You have more name recognition than Milton Williams. He's played well.
I love his storyline.
We're at the portion of NFL Daily in our relationship where now she's just lying. She was the Jalen Carter.
It's for the bit.
She was the Jalen Carter, and she had you as the Milton
Greg
Williams.
Bit Ruiner.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Don't do that.
Bit Ruiner.
Don't do that. Don't divide us here.
I will tell you, Karlaftis.
But it's a lie.
17 pressures, 3 sacks in the postseason alone. I mean, it's funny. I mentioned him on the show, a couple weeks ago, and I got Twitter mentions or Blue Sky mentions about thanks for mentioning Karlaftis, because he's sort of like a cult favorite in that fan base, and you can see why he really turns it on in the postseason.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see this. I think this is best on best in so many ways, and the way that those 4-man rushes, like you said, can just really execute. Both of these defensive coordinators can do dastardly things behind them.
Okay, let's go to the next question. Which coordinator? Now, you wrote it up. We have a nice little document. We all shared.
We collaborated.
We came up with topics, and Jordan's was which coordinator will be the biggest factor. And I'm like, where's the juice? When you mentioned that initially, you're like, which coordinator is gonna be the bigger creep? What was it? Who's gonna be the bad guy? I forget.
I said which coordinator is gonna be the biggest bastard on Sunday.
That's how you sell it.
that's like, because these guys are gonna be so mean to each other, and I love it. It's gonna be awesome. Yeah. And I love how this Vic Fangio defense has accelerated what normally would take a couple of years. Traditionally, his system has taken a little bit of time to really not just be implemented, but like to have the right players and then to have everybody buy in. It's a lot of tendency studying. It's a lot of, pattern matching. It's a lot of these things that are complicated. And it also is predicated on having good players who can rush 4 up front, and then mixing different things that he likes to do out of those zone coverages and get a little sticky in those zone coverages on the back end. And having really good inside linebackers helps with this as well. Having Cooper DeJean, you can stay in your preferred nickel package the entire game. And I just think that not only is this one of the best defenses we've seen all year and really manifested that way over time, it drew some concern early in the season. And I remember saying on NFL Daily, that's just a Vic Fangio defense. You're going to wonder what they're doing early on. And once it clicks, you can really, really see the vision. And I think that where one of the things I'm most excited about to the first question is how well the Chiefs offense and Andy Reid, I'm going to count him in with the coordinators. He's not a coordinator, obviously, but he's going to be calling the game against Vic Fangio.
Matt Nagy erasure.
Well, Matt Nagy and Vic Fangio have their own history, which is fascinating. They worked together in Chicago. They went against each other all the time. And Matt Nagy knows what Vic Fangio is capable of. But this Andy Reid offense and the way that the Chiefs have been so comfortable just picking away at different parts of the field, picking at the seams a little bit, getting the screen game going, and really like biding their time and setting up the longer downfield passing game that we've seen in recent weeks. It's a perfect way to play this Vic Fangio defense. It's going to be fascinating, that juxtaposition between what Vic is going to do and what he's going to try to deploy with all of these talented players who've really emerged, and then what Matt Nagy
who's
slash
the
Andy
bastard?
Reid.
It's Fangio?
But we got to talk about Spags.
Well, we're going to talk about all of them, but I want to know, what is your answer? You asked the question.
I mean, I am like the biggest Vic Fangio fangirl on
So
the
you feel
planet.
uncomfortable saying this?
Okay.
So
It's a really good point on the screens, too. If it's hard to find a bad number for the Eagles' defense in general. I think at this point we can safely, at least I feel comfortable. I don't want to speak for you guys, but they are the best defense in the league.
Yeah.
They are. They absolutely are the best.
Week 7.
Yeah.
Since
Yeah,
week 7.
Yes.
the most talented, the results, all of it. But the one weakness is that you can kind of find in the numbers. The next thing is that they're not a good screen defense, and that really plays to the Chiefs. What is your answer in terms of who's the bastard?
Well,
we say that lovingly also. I want to point that out.
Yeah, here's the thing. You can say it lovingly, but it could also be interpreted negatively depending on the outcome. And this is where I get nervous with Kellen Moore.
Yes.
Got a lot of head coaching heat with the Saints. We're in New Orleans and everything else, right? But if there's one weakness in this matchup, it's him. I don't trust him as much as I trust all the other coordinators involved in this. And
I think that's fair.
Yes, even Nagy. And because Nagy he's insulated by Reid.
Yes.
Also,
Whereas,
Nagy, results. You have to,
he
at
has
some point, give
experience.
him some love.
He rose to head coach because of what he'd done before, right? Moore, I don't care about whether he's not been a head coach before. I care about what he did in recent weeks, which is putting his quarterback who was hobbled in a divisional round game into deep drops in his own end zone with pressure bearing down on him in a tight game. It's situationally, I've had issues with them all year, and a lot of the blame has shifted to Jalen Hurts holding onto the ball too long, which is somewhat valid at times, but I think that he hasn't quite put them in the best spots all the time, which is hard to do. Nobody's perfect, but in a matchup like this, where it's best on best and the margin can be so slim, that's the last guy I want to trust out of those coordinators.
Dang.
So that's where it comes in as a negative thing. They are also, if you look at them year over year, and I know they fell apart down the stretch last year, but I did just some digging into where were they last year versus this year, prepping for what might await more after this game. They finished 8th in offense last year. They finished 8th in offense in total yards again this year, but vastly different appearance. They were 2nd in rushing, obviously, with Saquon, 29th in passing, which kind of leads to where we'll go later in this in this preview regarding this game. I don't trust him as much.
Even those numbers are flattering to them because they're given better advantages because of their defense in terms of like DVOA and total efficiency. They've been pretty similar the last 2 years. Overall, you're right, and totally different how they got there, but they're not even like a top 10 offense, which is crazy when you have Saquon Barkley, and it's why the answer is clearly Spags, because he's the biggest bastard in maybe the history of football in terms of a defensive coordinator. At this point, you got to give him the love. Belichick would be there if you counted him as like a play caller, and there's been other ones, but I'm talking about what I know best over the last 25 years. They're the two. They're the two on defense that would be at the very top. And to me, the number one question in this game is what you just said. Can Spagnuolo make Jalen hold the ball? That to me is it. I honestly think that like that's going to be the test. You might be able to tell it early. When he's getting rid of the ball quickly, everything can work. And when he's holding onto the ball, good things are just not going to happen. So with what he is showing, can he make him hold onto the ball? And then when he does hit on those blitzes, because he will, he always does, is it a catastrophic play for Jalen Hurts? Or is it just a bad play? Is it a throwaway? Is it a 3-yard sack? Like, you can live with that. You can't live with the turnovers, the fumbles, the negative 14-yard sacks that Hurts will take. So to me, it's Hurts, and it's so funny because it's these storylines that have been traveling with him for years since Todd Bowles did it to him. How does he handle the blitz? So it's, can he get rid of the ball? And when Spags does confuse their offensive line, which he will at some point, how does Hurts handle that?
This offensive line, by the way, these tackles have like the 2nd and 5th best protection against pressure rate in the NFL right now at their respective position. And still, despite that, and part of this, Nick, is about Kellen Moore too. I refuse to say that this is all about Jalen Hurts, but when he does hold on to the ball, his pressure rate skyrockets to 40.5%, despite the protection that he gets from those two bookends on the outside. And he even takes a long time to get the ball out against the blitz, which also is a schematic thing. 2.85 seconds on average per next gen, 5th longest in the NFL, and has the 2nd highest sack rate against the blitz in the NFL this season. And you have Saquon MFing Barkley, who is also a good pass-catching outlet back, who is also a good pass pro back. I'm going to get to that later in the preview. But part of this is just infuriating design as well, in my opinion. And that's what I think Spags is going to watch, some of the ways that teams, and particularly the Rams a couple weeks ago, played Kellen Moore and almost forced Kellen Moore to play into his worst habits and his worst tendencies, and in turn, Jalen Hurts to play into his worst habits and his worst tendencies. And he got teed off on. And I do believe Steve Spagnuolo is a huge factor in this game.
Meanwhile, he's like, spending his nights putting together his Saints staff here. I don't know.
This is what I'm saying. That. Yeah, it's not good. It's not setting up good for him. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't think that the Eagles can win. It's just that is the situation in which he's going to have his work cut out for him.
It's not quite Parcells making calls from, I believe it was in New Orleans.
Putting his house on the market.
His New Orleans, from his hotel room, putting together his staff. And there was only like 1 week in between at that point, between the Packers and the Patriots Super Bowl. And he's not paying attention at all. And Belichick's getting all mad because Parcells isn't paying attention before Patriots Packers. That was a long time ago. Let's move on to what matters more, experience or youth. We're way behind pace here.
Really quick, though, I want to say Jalen Hurts was great against Spags and the blitzes in the last time these two teams played in the championship.
It's a great point that.
Thanks. Glad we got to it.
That, like, he did handle it perfectly last time around. He could not have played better. And I think he needs to do what he did there, which was be aggressive. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to have to throw those go balls on, like, 3rd and 2 when they blitz and just trust himself.
Well, he's got A.J. Brown for that, so that's good.
What matters more here in this Super Bowl, youth or experience, Nick?
It is youth. It is youth because the Chiefs have paved their path here by being the most annoying team to play against when they're on offense. 3rd and 5, Patrick Mahomes rolls out. Everything's breaking down. All hell is breaking loose, and yet he finds somebody beyond the line to gain. Or he's already 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, and they're still biting on the pump fake, and they're picking up first downs. How do you eliminate that? You eliminate that with a bunch of young dogs who are athletic and can cover a lot of field and who are coached really well. And that is who these Eagles are. I know that there's more experience on the side of the Chiefs, But the Eagles athletes, I think, tip the scales in their favor. They're also one of only 2 teams in the Super Bowl era to have the NFL's rushing leader and the number 1 total defense in the NFL. I just want to think about that for a second. The last team that did that was the Cowboys with Emmitt Smith. We know what happened with them. They won Super Bowls. They played the K-gun offense. They dominated. I have a feeling that if there's one antidote to this Chiefs offense this year, and America can all get on board with this because you all hate the Chiefs, it is wearing whatever shade of green they wear now. Hopefully they go back to Kelly. And the people with the wings on their helmets, it's Philadelphia Eagles.
Okay. So you go youth. It's funny because, the Chiefs have more starters returning from this game, 15 to 12. But they have a lot of young players, too. When I think of vulnerabilities for the Chiefs, it's people that nobody talks about. Jaden Hicks, Brian Cook.
I think about half their secondary.
Maybe Jalen Watson. Yeah. Maybe Shamari Connor, who's healthy. And, these names never come up. But those are guys that, if Kellen Moore and Jalen Hurts and those receivers do their jobs, they should have mismatches with. So they're 2 teams that have a nice mix of youth and experience, but it's the Eagles that are definitely a little younger.
Yeah, and I was conflicted on this. It was a great question because I can't shake this feeling in my head that the Chiefs are like this monolith. They're like Pangea breaking apart. They are inevitable, right? It's so hard to stop them when you feel that sense of dread if they start playing suffocation ball. If a couple of marginal things swing their way, you just can't shake that feeling that they just know how to do this and they've just been here before. At the same time, that youth, that energy, it's the reason why this sprint rebuild that Howie Roseman did is so successful so fast, is because they identified the correct talent and they are maximizing that young talent at every single position, which supplements and even equals it in places their core stars and some of the veterans that they had on the roster.
They swarm. And I think that's where you see the youth. Yeah. I do think they're a little bit faster overall, but these are 2 pretty physical teams in a league that's getting a little lighter. They're 2 of the bigger teams. I like that. I'm going to kick off the next one, which is if a player is at his best, who moves the needle in this game? And I want to talk about Xavier Worthy's development. They are using him, and he is performing like a true number 1 receiver. And he doesn't fit that mold because he's 165 pounds, and you think about him that he's not totally complete, and that's fine. They haven't. I mean, Sammy Watkins had one of the greatest postseasons of all time on this team. He wasn't a complete receiver, but for that postseason, he was a number 1 receiver, and he helped them win a freaking Super Bowl. And Xavier Worthy is that guy, but more. I think the subtleties that they've focused in on, and I think it's a lot about Marquise Brown showing up and starting to do some of the other Xavier Worthy things, where he's got about 3 different types of routes that he can do, and his footwork is so excellent, and he is so fast, and he can win against any type of coverage, and the offense is really built around him in a way, I think, over the last 5 weeks, especially the playoffs, that it wasn't earlier in the season, that he really is that good. I don't think there's a good matchup. Of course, the Eagles have a great secondary, but it's not like I'm trusting any one of those guys in a one-on-one situation. And they're a great team in terms of their pattern match and passing off guys. And maybe that's how you do it. But if you told me that he goes 9 for 165, like something crazy like that, I actually think he is capable. And he is the guy playing at a level that I don't think the rest of the country is totally caught up to where he is now, because he's so different than where he was in the first 12 weeks.
Well, it's also about the interconnectivity between what he can do as running, pretty much a full tree at this point, which he did in college, right? I mean, I know you watched a lot of him in college, Nick. He did that in college, so it was almost like getting like one toe after the other into the water, like with him, with Andy Reid, and trusting, as Andy Reid likes to sort of test his receivers and his skill players, how much can I trust you and how much can I stack onto your plate? You're really seeing it. And when he is in complement with Hollywood Brown, the Chiefs over the last 4 games have increased their scoring average by 5 points per game, because the interconnectedness of the 2, it builds more dimension into this passing game that was all like screens and Travis.
They were somehow the number 1 seed as the slowest team in the NFL. And now when you watch them, like, there are some routes where the 2 of them fly off the ball, and then they do comebacks because everyone is like, oh my God, these guys are actually fast. And it's just like you didn't see that. There wasn't that element in the Chiefs offense. It literally wasn't there.
Yeah.
I think Hollywood Brown is like one of the biggest X factors in this game, good or bad. I'm not sure how it's going to go, but he makes them so much faster. Give me your player who moves the needle.
Well, I think on that point, it was a lack of verticality, and they can now get vertical. It's an overall improvement on all parts. My player, if he's at his best, why does he move the needle? Going back to the defensive side, Zach Bond, because of the point I kind of just made in the last one, which was it's the stuff over the middle. Because if you are spending time taking away suddenly an offense that can get vertical outside, who is the one guy that's going to be able to stop what the Chiefs do best, which is find soft spots over the middle? It's Zach Bond, the number 1 graded coverage linebacker in the NFL this season, according to PFF. I feel like a lot of teams they've played have missed that X factor. You go down the path that they just followed, playing Buffalo, playing Baltimore. You could say Roquan was that guy, but it just seems like if I have to find one player on this defense against them, and I feel like I'm skewing heavy anti-Chiefs, and I'm not intentionally, but it just feels like Zach Bond. No, don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah, you are. I mean, we all are. It's unfortunate.
It's Zach Bond. He's going to be the guy that's going to be able to not only match up with Travis Kelce, but also take away enough of that area. But it's really still a collective effort on the defensive side for them.
Yeah, the Eagles are one of the best linebacking teams in defending the middle of the field, especially in coverage in the NFL. Travis Kelce has more yards in the middle of the field and against linebackers on passing plays since 2018. He has like the highest EPA of any player.
It's just where he lives.
It's insane, yeah. But like that is Zach Bond, NFL Daily first team All-Pro. Zach
there you
Bond,
go.
By the way.
I didn't have the heart to tell Fred Warner that he was on our second team, but I was like,
but he had an incomplete because the injury. Yeah. We love you, Fred. One of the players of NFL Daily. So I think that's a great point because that is an X factor between Zach Bond and Cooper DeJean and some of the rotations that they get into, and being able to trust the guys on the outside and trust the safeties. That is going to make defending the middle of the field so hard, and that's where the Chiefs have liked to live and breathe through most of the season before your guys emerged. I can't believe none of you brought up the most obvious one outside of Pat Mahomes, which is Saquon Barkley.
Oh, I didn't want to be,
that obvious. Yeah, I'll be that guy. Okay, but Saquon Barkley, you hold your breath every time he gets the ball, right? Because it's not like if he's going to break off the big run, the explosive run, the not just 20 plus yards run, but like the 50 plus yards run. It's a matter of when. And you just feel these stadium, like I've covered a couple games of his in person, and like you just feel the entire stadium hold their breath every single time. And I just think that it's just going to be an absolute X factor if Saquon Barkley, does Saquon Barkley things, which is play really well in the first half, but then increase in his yards per carry and his effectiveness and overall success rate through the second half of games, which he's done all season. And if he has 20 or more carries in a game, he has always, every single game this season, gone over 100 rushing yards. And that is an absolute factor when you also count this offensive line and you also count some of the things that you need to do to stay in your A-plus game plan and take the teeth out of that bastard's blitz.
There you go. I mean,
we said that word a lot. I hope that's okay.
Bastard.
I think it's allowed.
We mean it lovingly.
I want to go to what you think we might be overlooking here, because talking Saquon there, he's not just, a runner. He's a pass protector.
This is the thing that I've geeked out on so much over this season. And by the way, it will be hard for him to run against this Chiefs defense. They have the lowest missed tackle rate in the league this season. And those linebackers are very good on the Chiefs defense too. So what I really, really liked about what I watched all season with Saquon Barkley is how he effectively navigates his responsibilities in pass protection. It was so interesting the way that the Commanders tried to attack using Frankie Louvu as a blitzer pretty much anytime Saquon was off the field on a passing down, or anytime he was split out from the stack and into the flats as like an outlet for a blitz play, they would attack. They would try to get to Jalen Hurts that way because they did not have Saquon in pass pro. And then they also, that quarterback lead draw that they ran, they also like faked that Saquon was going to just be in pass pro, and instead he just like leaked up the gap as a lead blocker. So the Eagles are very aware of his gifts and his talents here. And I think that's another thing that could be a game changer against Steve Spagnuolo and all of his ability that we know he can do. But Steve Spagnuolo is going to have seen that on tape. And he's gonna look at those tendencies. He's going to have seen some of those things that even through the course of the game, what Dan Quinn was doing in order to try to torment Jalen Hurts a little bit with that pressure, which, the Eagles broke that game wide open. But there were a couple of times there where you thought, man, that's a good plan against the Eagles offense.
Sneaky big factor could be Kenny Gainwell, who's made himself some money this year, by the way. I think he's a nice
How great of a name for a running back is Gainwell, by the way.
It's the perfect one.
I never even thought about that.
And you lose a lot when you take Saquon off
5.
the field. But I think
Two.
Kenny Gainwell can make big plays. I think the Chiefs might be a little vulnerable on the rush.
Do you like that we're air fiving over your head? Does that make you feel good?
My head is very
uncomfortable?
low, so it's like very easy
to
do so.
Greg, I swear to God, 3 times you almost hit me, and I swear to God.
I swear to God, number 4.
Who's the player or element we're overlooking, Shooky?
Nick Bolton. And it sounds a lot like what I just said about Zach Bond, except Nick Bolton, the grades don't shine well on him. Right. I think he's overlooked. He's never garnered a postseason accolade that he may have deserved over the course of his career, but he makes
can't put too much into those PFF grades.
I know.
Especially the coverage ones. Not like they're not a piece to the puzzle. Just saying.
I know. No, and I don't judge my analysis on it, but I just know that if you're looking to justify
my analysis,
pish posh, he makes big plays. He just has a knack for coming through in the biggest spots. I think back to week 3 against Atlanta, where he just shut down the Falcons' rushing attempt on 4th down to win that game. It was early. It was on the road, but it felt like a tone setter and a reminder of this guy who was playing through a back issue at the time. He's not going anywhere. He's got experience. He made a big play in this Super Bowl 2 years ago when they played in Phoenix with that return of that fumble, which kind of swung the game in their favor. At that point, the Eagles had a lot of the momentum. I just feel like he's going to come through in a big spot this time around. It's going to be, again, kind of like with the Eagles, it's going to be a collective effort. It always is. But if there's one guy who I think people are not paying attention to on this team, I mean, we could talk about Karlaftis. Obviously, people are going to pay attention to Chris Jones. Don't forget about Nick Bolton.
No, that linebacker crew has come in so close.
The other one could be Leo Chenal.
In this entire run.
Dang good linebacker group.
Like Drew Tranquill, Chanel, and Bolton. It's always rotating. There's no more Willie Gay there, but like every year we get to this point in the season,
they always make plays.
It used to be a thing that it was always a weakness for them year after year after year, even after Spagnuolo got there. And then they figured it out about 3 or 4 years ago with this crew, and they've only gotten better, and it makes them so multiple. That's part of the reason my element people are overlooking is just like this Chiefs team is so much better than they were 8 weeks ago.
Yes.
I was glad you weren't going to say 2 years ago.
Then people, I don't think they're worse than they were 2 years ago.
No, but you're right. You're right.
I think they're better than they were at this point last year.
Yes.
Think about what's changed. For like when you think about the AFC, it was like, oh, are the Chiefs going to get lucky and get through? And then you actually watch how the Bills played over the last month, and watch how the Ravens played in that game, certainly, and some of the ups and the downs. And then you watch what's different about this Chiefs team. Number one, I mentioned the speed with the receivers. They're just a different offense. Number two, that time off, Hunt and Mahomes in particular on offense, they look like different players just in terms of their agility. So they're different. Number three, health. I mentioned Amenahu. I mentioned on the back end, it's some of their rotational players in terms of Shamari Connor being back there. It's Jalen Watson, who's a huge upgrade from Najee Johnson. Like that's a huge upgrade. It's not something that you're really thinking about exactly. Justin Reed back there wasn't always healthy.
One
this
of my
season.
favorite players.
Like Amenahu wasn't healthy at all this season. Like these are big time pieces for them that they're essentially, because they have a lot of cap commitments, replacing guys that were minimum salary, bottom of the roster guys that they've done a good job filling in. But it's one of the reasons they didn't look as good this year, as a lot of those guys were in there and they're not in there as much. You can actually kind of include like DeAndre Hopkins and Justin Watson in that mix. They're not really in the 3 receiver sets, although it wouldn't shock me if like Watson shows up in the Super Bowl and like makes a couple of plays. So you look at that, and then you also look at the way Mahomes has been playing. We haven't talked Mahomes. I know you wanted to talk about him a little bit, Jourdan, here. He's just been playing, I think, a little more confidently, getting rid of the ball more quickly and more willing to be aggressive over the last 5 or 6. You add all that up, and if this was the team that we saw all season, we would have been like, oh, yeah, that's the best team in the NFL. Or maybe like you could convince yourselves the Eagles or the Lions at the time were.
Well,
but
people
like,
wouldn't be as mad at them because they couldn't argue with it.
They wouldn't be lucky. These playoff results and December results weren't lucky. If anything, the Bills were lucky to even be in that game.
Yeah.
Let's all hail Patrick Mahomes before we move on to our final point.
I know. It is so fun to watch him play football. And I think it's interesting because we go through these phases with players who are great, who are all-time great. And I think it's actually, if you look at some of the on-the-ground chatter and some of the narrative swings, not necessarily year over year, but week over week, or, fans and how fans react and all of those things, it's hard to be that sustainably great without someone just really hating you.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that we are getting to watch the entire arc of this player's career in the biggest games, in the biggest stages. And honestly, he is one of the biggest X factors on the field for both teams. Saquon Barkley is going to make a huge difference in this game if he can get going. We know that already. We know that the Eagles, in my opinion, the Eagles are the more complete of these two teams and the deepest of dude teams, right? But Patrick Mahomes has that magic in him. And he's just got this, when he really turns it on, you can't stop it. It's like watching this wave coming at you and you're just like, all right, well, this is my fate.
Right. I think the weight of having to make it every year and how tough it is to make it back every year, that does show up with the Chiefs. They just find a way to win ugly games during it. And you can almost see him playing with a little more joy once they saw the light at the end of the tunnel with the 3 games in 15 days.
That's when it happened.
Yeah,
Christmas.
we're
right
so
around
close.
Christmas.
And it was kind of
yeah.
Okay, the weight is finally off, and now I'm just back to Patrick Mahomes.
And I'm playing ball. And they played the best ball of the year, and they've continued to do. They have figured out how to peak late. And it starts with their quarterback. He was still playing some of the best football in the NFL for most of the season. We've talked about this. I'd get crushed online every week. Why is Mahomes in your top 5? Because it doesn't look good, but trust me, it's good.
Well,
He
it's very good.
lacked a little style, lacked a little sizzle.
For him, he had a down year. For his caliber, for his standard.
Yes.
Yes.
Because a lot of it was a slog. Early in the season, it was
creaky.
a slog. Yes.
That's the word
Yes.
I use a lot when I watch Travis Kelce run. It felt creaky. Their whole operation just felt it just hurts.
But
Right.
I think that they know that they have the opportunity to get here almost every year if they play it right. And these are long seasons, but they're built for it.
They are the greatest team of all time in terms of a dynasty if they win this game. It's really crazy. I mean, you can say others had higher highs if you wanted to or come up with some sort of argument, but there is no argument against 3 straight Super Bowls and making it 5 out of 6 years and winning for it. There's just that just hasn't happened. Now, shout out to the Packers, by the way, who get a little lost in the shuffle. They did win 3 straight championships. It just so happened it was the last 2 NFL championships and the first couple, the last NFL championship and the first couple Super Bowls.
Half of it, they weren't there. Pre-merger doesn't count.
It's honestly kind of stupid. They did win three straight titles. It's just the league changed 1 year before they
the
won.
forward pass was barely legal at that time.
I don't even think we had telephones back then.
Just kidding.
Bart Starr was
I know
underrated.
you were 5 at that time,
Right.
Greg, but it's fine.
That actually is still the best dynasty over a 6-8 year period, but it was a different league, and we do count the Super Bowl era as the modern era. So that's what I'm talking about. Final take. We got to get out of here. We got a lot of interviews, and we're getting to Greg Olsen next. So we're gonna wrap this up. It's one final take, so hot that it hurts my feelings or hurts your feelings. Shout out to the underrated singer-songwriter Caroline Polachek, who has a song, So You're So Hot, It Hurts My Feelings, which always stuck in my head.
You've said that a few times today. I've not reacted any time, and you keep saying it.
Yeah, well, now
look
it's
at this
for the
poll.
audience.
Look
Yeah.
at this poll.
What poll?
Poll. P-U-L-L. Look at this deep
not-
cut. Look at this deep cut. Greg, oh my God.
I mean, I'm going to look up Caroline Polachek. I think that's how you said her
come
name.
on. She's got a lot of streams.
So
Spotify.
it is shocking because, and I know you guys did this out of respect for the doc, right? Because we were all in the doc, talking back and forth with each other. But it is something that can fit in so many of these categories, whether it's a game-changing scenario, whether it is a player at his best, whether it is something we're all overlooking. And one of the things that will probably make a difference in this game, that made a difference in the last matchup in the Super Bowl when these two teams played, was Patrick Mahomes scrambling and moving around. He doubles his scramble rate in the postseason. And the Eagles are the number 22 ranked defense against scrambling quarterbacks this year. His 15% scramble rate is the highest in his career, not just the postseason. And it absolutely killed the Bills a couple weeks ago.
And you know why the Eagles struggle with that? Because when they're too busy flying around the field all the time with all their youth, you lose a little bit of discipline in that process.
Yeah.
That's what swung this game 2 years ago.
Yes.
Mahomes on a bad ankle just takes off down the middle of the field. Like, it's always been a problem, but it could very much be a problem.
What ankle?
It swung. I feel like it swung every big Chiefs game ever. That he only runs when he absolutely needs to rip your heart out. He did it in his first playoff run ever. In one of the greatest comebacks in NFL history against a defense that gave up 3 points a couple weeks later in the Super Bowl. And the only reason Pat Mahomes doesn't have another Super Bowl trophy is because they lost the coin toss and the Patriots got it first in the 2018 championship, because he was going touchdown after touchdown after touchdown, and a lot of it was him scrambling. It's absolutely outrageous. My final take is the Chiefs actually aren't that good defending the run, and that their defense, if you want to find a flaw in the playoffs, hasn't been quite as good as they were in the regular season on outside zone runs in the playoffs. You know who's cooked them? Joe Mixon. James Cook then did it too. If you add up their outside runs over the last 2 weeks, it's like 19 for 132. Like, play after play after play. They are not really maintaining gap integrity. Then you look over the course of the season. What are they awful at? Stopping tight ends. Like, EPA per play, success rate, 31st, 32nd in the leagues. I think Dallas Goedert could take advantage. Those are two really important parts of the Eagles. I think that's why the Eagles have been good. They can hit you wherever your weakness is. The outside runs and the tight ends, I think that's how the Eagles do it.
9.3 yards per carry on outside runs for Saquon Barkley this season.
Look at that. That's teamwork.
NFL Daily, yeah.
Thank you.
High five.
All right, one last take that is so hot that it hurts your feelings, Shook.
Polar opposite of what you just said, which is if this Chiefs defense finds a way to shut down Saquon, can Jalen Hurts and Kellen Moore overcome that? Or are we destined for a miserable experience in which Jalen Hurts is forced to hold onto the ball too long? And it repeats that little period against the Rams in the playoffs.
Who are you picking here, Shook? Are we going to pick the game? Why not?
That was polar opposite, not polar opposite, which sounds the same, but are two very different words, because I say pull as pull, not pull.
So. For like maybe 3 seconds there, I was like, what is she talking about? And then it hit me.
It was.
It's also why I had no idea what you were talking about.
I need to enunciate my use.
It's why I had no idea what you were talking about 5 minutes ago when you said that's a nice pull, and I was like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I was looking just beyond you.
I've just got to move on. I mean, I'm taking the Eagles. I just said why. I'm not as bold as Claybon, who thinks they might be up a couple scores and not have to sweat it out. But I do think they find a way. I really hope we're not all going Eagles.
Well, I was on board with Claybon with the same idea. My score landed around like 30-25, that range, and the idea is that it's really more like 30-17. The Chiefs score, they go for 2. Some sort of, we end up in that range. But I worry about that because... You say I worry a lot?
It's okay to fret. I'm also a fretter.
We're all picking against the Chiefs.
A lot of anxiety in this body here. The Eagles had such a lead in this first iteration. I know these are two different teams 2 years ago, but I hate the idea of them building another big lead, and then Mahomes storms back, inevitable, like you said. So I'm not I'm confident. Eagles are winning.
Oh, we all picking the Eagles? Because hell yeah, I'm picking the Eagles, 24-21. And I think that at least the first half of this is going to be just a delight of a defensive battle that'll get the non-ball knowers going, ugh, worst Super Bowl ever. The Super Bowl nobody wanted. When actually it is a beautiful masterclass in these two defensive coordinators who rock.
As we've gotten closer to it, and I wonder if that's everyone out there, or maybe it's just the people I've talked to. I think as you gotten closer, it's like, actually, these are two incredible kind of historic teams. The Eagles have been this good for a while, 2 Super Bowls out of 3, but also one of the best NFC teams really throughout the Howie Roseman era, and this Chiefs team, like the players, the coaches, it's an incredible matchup. We're not done talking about this game just yet. We're going to bring on another ball knower. That's Greg Olsen, yes, of Carolina Panthers fame, but also now of Fox Sports right after the break. All right, back here on NFL Daily. Thrilled to be wrapping up the best preview show in the game. We started with Fred Warner. We gave you the nitty gritty in the middle. And now we have Greg Olsen, for my money, the best color man analyst in the business. And apparently a longtime buddy of Jourdan Rodrigue.
Yeah.
Who knew?
We go way back to those early Panther beat days.
Yes.
Standing by my locker having to answer why we win more games.
Okay, to be fair, I was not
What year
asking
did you?
that.
No,
Yeah.
what year? Remind me what year you.
16. Yeah.
Okay, so
that
you
was
got
a tough
17.
One. Yeah,
but you got
17 was
17
so much
playoffs.
fun.
That was fun.
Yeah, that was
and
so
then
much fun.
and then you were there. Yeah, then it wasn't so.
But I
good.
got to tell you, like Greg, I mean, listeners, like you guys got to know what kind of guy Greg was in the locker room. I mean, I was a kid reporter, scared every single
did
day
great.
walking in there. You got me in with Ryan Khalil, which was a big deal.
Yep.
And then you looked out for me every single day I was in there.
you
and
were great.
You explained things to me, which I loved. And it really had helped me set up. And when people are saying, hey, he's going to get into commentary, into color analysis and all of that, I was like, I mean, obviously, he explains things better than anyone else in the league, and I
appreciate
love it.
you saying that. It was fun working with you. It's been fun to see your career just continue to ascend, and it's all come full circle. Here we are.
mean,
I know. Here we are at the Daily Desk.
I know Greg Olsen loves talking ball because he said he's been here for, what is this, 7 hours?
I've been here since now. I wasn't doing media the whole time. I had a panel, like a press conference panel I had to do, but I'm going on
That's wild.
8 hours.
And he's here with DraftKings. We're going to ask him about that in a little bit. But I wanted to get into the game and just you're looking. Let's start on the Eagles' offensive side of the ball. What is the coolest thing that they do in terms of the running game that maybe the average fan wouldn't totally understand in terms of the details that they get done to help Saquon Barkley do what he does?
Yeah, so I think the first place you have to start when you start talking about a team's willingness and ability, both of those things, to do really well in the run game, you can talk about the offensive line and the scheme and if the running back and Saquon. We can go on and on about that, and we probably will. But none of it matters if you're playing in shootouts. None of it matters if you're not playing good defense. None of it, anytime you talk about an offense's ability to run the football, it always starts on defense. And when you talk about a defense's ability or inability to stop the run, my first question is, well, how many points does their offense score? Because if your offense is scoring 17 a game, you better stop the run. If your offense is scoring 30 a game, it doesn't matter if you stop the run or not, because let teams run it. You're not going to beat me. So it always starts with the other complementary side of the ball that sets the table, right? So obviously they check that box, Vic Fangio, the job he's done defensively. Now, what they do, you think 2 years ago when they were on this stage, it was Miles Sanders. He was a 1,200-yard rusher. This has been a traditionally high-level running team. Jalen Hurts is a factor in that, and of course the offensive line and the style and the coaching and yada, yada, yada. Now all of a sudden you insert arguably one of the best running backs, right? It's him, it's McCaffrey, it's Derrick Henry, it's that small group of guys over the last handful of years that are generationally good running backs, and you put them behind this offensive line, and now this is where you get the magic, right? So it's the whole thing like, oh, I can't believe the Giants let him go. No offense to Saquon Barkley or the Giants, but Saquon Barkley wasn't rushing for 2,000 yards. And if he did, they were probably going to not win a game, because they weren't ready to have a great running team because it wasn't going to move the needle. So they check so many boxes, what that unlocks for them to do philosophically with the third downs and fourth down and the tush push. And we can go on and on about what it unlocks for them. But it's a very special combination that most teams don't have, which is why you don't see most teams run the ball this frequently.
I love what you said about bringing the complement of the defense in there too, Greg, because I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit more to the listener about just how much Vic Fangio's death by 1,000 paper cut system is really the inversion of the suffocation ball they play on offense and really plays keep away in the best way from teams.
I love that.
Well, I've been covering a lot of Kyle Shanahan, so you know it's a dark time over there.
I like Shanahan. I like Kyle.
He's great.
So again, you think about the 2-year journey for Philadelphia to be back in this spot, and their defense under Jonathan Gannon 2 years ago was really good. The offense under Shane Steichen was really good. They lose a close one, shootout. Wasn't their defense's best game, but they're playing Mahomes and things happen. And they lose both coordinators. And then last year, they definitely take a step back defensively, and they take a significant step back also offensively. And he has to, Sirianni now has to bring in a new set of coordinators again. That is very hard to do year in and year out on either side of the ball, let alone both. Now, somehow the miracle that Vic Fangio is not good enough to be down in Miami and he's available is a whole nother conversation. But he's available. He's a great fit. It's exactly what they needed. They've got some young pieces. He kind of brings the experience. He brings the edge. He brings what they need. And now everything that their offense wants to be is perfectly complemented by what the defense was all season long. I think they finished either 1 or 2 in total or overall points, points allowed. And again, without that, so many aspects of what makes the offense so good is less effective. So you can't get, I would argue that Fangio's the assistant coach of the year or whatever that award is, because his impact on that team to get them back to this Super Bowl is as equally important as Saquon and Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Kellen Moore. And they all deserve their flowers, but it hinges on the ability that the opponent's not scoring 1 million points.
We saw that all kind of come together in the NFC Championship game, right? You force all the turnovers, you capitalize offensively. But for much of this season, I feel as if, especially since probably week 7, it's been more about the defense than anybody, right?
No doubt.
They hold the Giants to 3 points. They start to ride this wave. Saquon is the face of the offense. But I feel like what we don't pay attention to at times, what I want to ask you about is is he married with this offensive line? Because they've undergone a lot of changes, year over year. They lost Kelsey. They moved Jurgens over to center where he was playing center in college before he had to play guard. You have a number of different guys. Mekhi Becton goes from tackle to guard. What can you say about all the changes that they've undergone and how it's kind of just led them here?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think when you bring in these really established veteran running backs, you look at just this past year, right? You got Joe Mixon down in Houston. You got Derrick Henry in Baltimore. You got Saquon, obviously, in Philadelphia. And all of them to mixed results and different. But what teams find themselves being forced to do is they say, okay, I'm taking in Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, whoever it is. What do they specialize in, right? Are they gap runners? Are they inside zone? Are they perimeter runners? Are they one cut and go guys? Are they a see it, patient, and then hit it? Every running back has their different style and flavor. But what happens is now you bring in this running back and you pay him $1 gazillion and you say, okay, I gotta do what they're comfortable doing. I'm not going to ask Saquon Barkley to not do what he's comfortable doing. But then what that does is, well, what about the offensive line? What if you have an offensive line that's built to be a zone team and all of a sudden you want to be a gap scheme downhill counter team, or you want to be a downhill gap counter team and you're big bodies and you're big and vertical, and maybe you're not as good on the perimeter. Maybe you can't get big bodies in space. Well, then you have the Philadelphia Eagles, and they can run zone, they can run counter, they can spread you out, they can pack you in, they can play vertical and remove you off the line of scrimmage. They can pin and get big bodies out on the perimeter. They have the combination of the versatile running back who can really check every box to go along with an offensive line that is not going to be challenged or strained by anything that Saquon Barkley or Kellen Moore feel comfortable doing. Again, that's not normal. Like, that's not most teams. That's not how most offenses, they build it around a certain identity and they lean into it because that's the best way to maximize it. There's so many layers to this Philadelphia team that one unlocks the next. And when it all rolls together, they're really good.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things Greg brought up earlier in our preview, our middle portion, we were like in a sandwich between Fred and Greg. It was great. The outside run, Saquon Barkley, 9.5 yards per outside run that he's had this year at 37 times. We think that might be a factor here, stretching that Chiefs defense out a little bit wider. But I have to ask you, because we do want to talk about the Chiefs, and I know we've only got you for a limited amount of time. We could talk to you all day, Greg. But how do you counter what Steve Spagnuolo is going to bring? And how have you, I know you have watched the history files of Spags and admired him for a long time. So how has he continued to do this? And how do you stop those blitzes? Yeah,
the play callers and the assistant, the coordinators, play callers in the Andy Reid case, obviously he's the head coach, but just the assistants, the staff, the play callers, the coordinators of this matchup are equally as entertaining and equally as interesting as the star players. These are as good of combination of, especially on the defense side of the ball, defensive play callers, as you're going to find in the league with Spags and Fangio. So what's so unique about Spags, especially when he has this 2-week head start, not a head start, but like a 2-week lead-in, is his ability to be game plan specific to attack you at what you do is really what his calling card has been all the way back to the Giants. So his ability to game plan, his ability to say, okay, what are the ways that I can eliminate Saquon Barkley without exposing myself on the back end to quick passing game, explosive plays on the perimeter to A.J. Brown and not let Devontae Smith get over the top? Like, how do I put all of the things that Philadelphia is capable of doing in a bucket, organize them and say, okay, this is priority 1, this is priority 2, and work his way down the checklist. So if I'm Spags, I'm saying, okay, I don't want Jalen Hurts to operate as a passer inside the pocket. I want to get him moving laterally. I don't want him moving up in the pocket. I think he's a better pocket thrower and a scramble runner than he is a scramble thrower. And what I mean by that is so often when you play quarterbacks that have this skill set, you hear every coach in the league say, keep him in the pocket, don't let him escape. I think Jalen Hurts is one of the unique conversations where, like, no, I want him to move. Now, I don't want him running forward. I want him running sideways and make him throw on the run towards the sideline, because in the pocket, on time, as an effective in-rhythm passer, he's really good. He's got great weapons. He's got great timing. He's got anticipation. He trusts his line. So all of those things play into his favor. He will kill you as a scramble runner. I think you can force him to take sacks, throw the ball away, force the ball into some bad windows as a on-the-move passer in scramble drill. So I would try to get interior pressure, off-ball pressure, inside games, get that pocket in his lap and get him moving sideways. And now you've got to be able to plaster. Now you've got to be able to match up on second reaction drill with Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert and A.J. Brown, which, again, is a challenge all in of itself. But I think Spags is as good of a defensive play caller as we've seen in the history of the league. He's as good of a game planner, especially in these big moments, of any defensive play caller we've seen in the history of the league. And he's going to have something unscouted, something that they haven't seen before that Philly's going to have to identify early in the game and have a plan for.
Before we let you go, I want to. You did this game a couple of years ago. Yep. Great call on the game. We got to get Greg back on that. That's a whole other story. But what do you think is different, better, maybe about Patrick Mahomes now than then, or at least different?
I think their offense is played. Their offense wasn't the juggernaut this year, or really the last couple of years that we've seen. The early days, right, where it was lightning in a bottle. It was Tyreek. It was Kelsey. They were flying. It was like fireworks all over town. They went through a very interesting transition. The Super Bowl 2 years ago when they beat Philly. Remember, the narrative the entire season long was you can't win with this young rookie-laden defense, and then they won the Super Bowl. And then last year, there's the turnover, there's the uncertainty at wide receiver and skill group. Other than Kelsey, who does he have? And the defense really carried the load. They became the strength and the identity of the team. I think this year it's balanced out more than it was in the past. Now, is this offense the high-scoring mid-30s point a game they were in the Tyreek era years ago? No, but I don't think they have to be, right? Like in those days, because the defense wasn't as strong, they were playing to just outscore you from the moment they got the ball. They don't feel that pressure anymore. So they have the ability to win shootouts. They did 2 years ago. They can win a 30-point game.
Just did.
But they don't have to. And I think that's the biggest difference with this iteration of the Chiefs than like the not even the last couple Super Bowls, but like the previous era of that, like early in Mahomes' career.
Yeah.
They just wanted to outscore you and out-offense you. They can. They don't have to. And that's a credit to their ability to rebuild this defense through the draft, through free agency, of course, Chris Jones being the constant. And that defense, it's an understatement, but like more than carries their fair share.
It seems like since Christmas, they've taken a next step offensively, though. What has really kind of keyed that, in your opinion?
Good teams with good coaches and good quarterbacks and veteran players, DeAndre Hopkins and Travis Kelce. Those guys have played a lot of football.
Yeah.
And I think the offensive line has settled down. I think he's getting better protection than he has over the last stretch. And listen, you got the best player. He could go down as the best player ever. He's on his way. He's not there yet, but he's damn near close. And he's got Kelsey. He's got DeAndre Hopkins again later, but a veteran later. Like, good players get better the longer it goes. The goal is not to be the best team in September and October, and they've proven that. No one's ever coming out of the first half of the season being like, the Kansas City Chiefs are a juggernaut. We haven't said that for years. Yet here we are in February, and they're the last team one of the last two teams standing.
As I admire your bracelets, can you tell us what you're doing here with DraftKings?
Yeah.
I like the bracelet game.
Oh, thanks.
One of them is the football team he coaches, by the way.
One of them is our football team. One of them is TEU. We got a whole bunch of stuff going. Again, a pod for another day. But it's been a lot of fun. I've worked with DraftKings over the last year or so. Helped them when they brought sports betting to North Carolina, was a part of that launch. And again, this is the week, right, where everyone tunes into the game for a lot of different reasons. Of course, you're a diehard Chiefs fan, you're a diehard Philadelphia fan, or you're just a football fan, or you want to have a little entertainment value, you want to have some skin in the game, you want to have a fun prop bet, there's something for everyone from the entertainment purpose that draws people into the biggest spectacle in all of sports. And with DraftKings and their partnership and what they allow for their fans and their customers to just, again, connect with the game even a little bit deeper, have a little bit more vested rooting interest in the outcome, even if you don't care who necessarily wins. You might care who wins for other, right? So for the other reasons. So I think that's so much fun. No bigger week than Super Bowl week. And it's been a lot of fun working with them over the last year or so.
And honestly, it's funny. I know you're describing DraftKings, but you also described yourself, Greg. You bring people into the game unlike any other, and in ways that really help people feel connected. And like they do have a vested interest, a stake in it, because you describe those stakes so well. And I will say it until I'm blue in the face, but one of my favorites of all time.
Appreciate you guys.
You're sitting here next to me, and yet I'm suddenly transported just hearing that voice and some of the things you're talking about to my couch and playing Madden with my son.
Yeah.
You're a big part of our lives now. Olsen and Tarico.
Madden,
I love that combo.
It's a good combo.
It's a great.
We have a lot of fun with Madden. That's been a lot of fun, actually. I didn't know anything about the process of it all, and it's actually a fairly interesting recording process, just making up stories in your head off of an Excel sheet. It's a little more challenging. Early on, it was a little more challenging than I thought it would be. I'm getting my groove now, but you're calling lines of the game off of spreadsheets and game situations typed out. There's no video, there's no context, there's no who is it. It's like completion, 3rd and 10, converted first down, outer third of the field, second quarter, up by 10, go.
It's like, but your decades of knowledge.
And be excited about it.
I don't know who did it. What was the pass? Was he open? Was he covered? Did he catch with? I don't know. But it's been a lot of fun. I've gotten my groove with it, and I think my kids are tired of hearing my voice.
10-year-old Walker Rosenthal, he's going to announcer preferences, and he's clicking that Tarico and Olsen button. Thank you. All right, there goes Greg Olsen. Man, I could have sat there and just
hours.
I know, that used to be me. I'd stand at his locker and he would just talk ball and just teach for forever. And it just, oh man.
It's one of those things. We're at the end of the day here. He's been here since 9 a.m. He's been doing a lot of stuff. Bet I was tempted to just push that as far as we can go. Can we just do an hour with Greg Olsen? Because I just have a feeling like I'm sure his handler at some point would have stepped in, but he seemed like
handler was chilling.
He
enjoying the conversation.
He was ready to keep going.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have just kept pushing.
I was ready to drill down.
Look, they try to build big threes in the NBA. Bosh and Dwayne Wade and LeBron. Here's your big three right here. Good first day at the Super Bowl. First time NFL Daily on site. Really excited. Why are you laughing?
I'm just curious now. Like Jordan's laughing over here, and I know she's thinking like, which one's Chris Bosh?
Oh no, I didn't want to think about that. It's a good point though.
Anyway,
don't write it. Do you have any takeaways from your first day here?
I loved it. I thought this was so much fun. I like to learn, as you guys know, and I feel like every guest we had, getting to talk to both Fred and Greg, elite ball knowers on a podcast that prides itself on knowing ball. It was fun, and they genuinely enjoyed being here with us. It seemed like, otherwise they're really good at faking it. And it just was, I had the best time.
The time just goes so fast.
We got Greg a square meal. Shout out to iHeart, because Greg, we have 3 meals a day. And one of my prime goals internally, I didn't tell you this, was make sure because Greg is a machine and he'll just work all the way through, and you got to make sure he eats. Otherwise, he starts to look a little peaked.
If I was a little off for that Warner interview, I was not at.
You were great.
I needed that half of a wrap.
Needed fuel
to feel better for the.
iHeart has taken such good care of us today. It's been awesome.
We got a long week ahead. As I mentioned, Thursday is a massive show. A lot of really good guests. As I mentioned, Jaden Daniels, Jordan Love, Ashton Gianti. Stars, Puka Nacua, and more. And we're going to have great interviews on Friday as well. I'm glad you guys will be next to me. And yes, let's wrap this thing up. When we're hearing Greg Olsen's Madden voice in our head, except he's like right next to me, and I just want to touch him. Football is back.